Namaskar. Shall I start? Okay. Namaskar. मैं हूँ शेफाली वैद्या and welcome to the Jaipur Dialogues. The session that we are about to have, it's a very, very interesting session. It's a session that makes a lot of sense for all of us because all of us are here because of that one thing. We are here because we are all followers of Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means one that is without a beginning and without an end, one that is eternal. Dharma means the code of righteousness. Sanatana Dharma is the ancient and eternal code of righteousness which has enthralled and which has provided people with spiritual succor for millennia. Our people have wondered about the mysteries of the universe. They have pondered about the sense of oneness that connects all sentient beings. And they have codified it and they have called it Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma has had an appeal not just for people born in India, but for people born all over the world who, once they discover what is Sanatana Dharma, they are really attracted to it. And many of them have changed their ways to follow Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma, it does not follow a dogma, it does not follow one particular book, it does not follow one particular prophet. It is the most natural code. In fact, Dr. David Frawley, who we are going to have as our first guest today to talk about what Sanatana Dharma means to him, he has said once, and I quote him, the beauty of Sanatana Dharma is that it's not a man made historical religion dependent upon a church, savior, or prophet, or preaching any belief or dogma. Hindu Dharma rises from the earth and from nature, from our inner being, and allows us to embrace the entire universe within us. So, we are going to talk about what Sanatana Dharma means to us. And this session is sponsored by Padma and GSN Murthy. And it's a very exciting session for me to chair because I have co travelers on this spiritual journey who come from very different backgrounds, who come from very different fields, and who are authorities in their own way on their topics and who have been exploring Sanatana Dharma for ages. Our first guest, and he's somebody who needs no introduction. We all have heard about his name, and if we are all travelers in this journey called Sanatana Dharma, we all have heard of him. He is Dr. David Frawley, or Vamadeva Shastri, as he is also known as. Dr. Frawley is a modern day rishi. He is a Padma Vibhushan. He is an American Hindu teacher, Acharya. He's an author who has written more than 30 books on topics such as the Vedas, Hinduism, that's Sanatana Dharma, Yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic astrology. He's published and read widely in India as well as in the United States. He's the founder and director of the American Institute of Vedic Studies in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which offers educational information and courses on yoga, philosophy, Ayurveda, and Vedic astrology. And he is one of the most respected Sanskrit and Sanatana Dharma scholars that we have around today. I would request Dr. Frawley to share his views. This is a pre-recorded message to share his views on what Sanatana Dharma means to him, what Sanatana Dharma means to the world, and what Sanatana Dharma has. What solutions does Sanatana Dharma have for the problems of the world?
Namaste, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. I'm happy to join another session of the Jaipur Dialogues. Our topic is said to be what makes Sanatana Dharma attractive. Or I suppose what is implied is what attracted you to Sanatana Dharma. As over the years, I have studied the many different aspects of the Sanatana Dharma and even been made into a Hindu Acharya of some sort. and of course, yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta. So what was it that attracted me to the Sanatana Dharma? Went by phases, certainly. The first thing I was connected to was the yoga and the Vedanta, the philosophy and the internal meditation practices. This was back in my teenage years, in the late 60s. And there, we came into contact with gurus from India for the first time. Some were coming like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi or Satchidananda, Prabhupada, so many. And there were others who had lineages that had been active and were still active, Yogananda, Kriya Yoga, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda. And we also had access to text like the works of Shankara, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and many related yoga texts. So that was there. Of course, we also had all the Western philosophy, other forms of mysticism, what was happening at the times. But there was a special pull for me from this philosophy of yoga and Vedanta, karma, rebirth, self-realization, universal consciousness, cosmic awareness, all these very profound philosophical statements. So that drew me in at the level of ideas and insights. And then at the level of personalities, coming into contact with the gurus, or even finding about their lives, figures like Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, Anandamaya Ma, who I was able to connect to, and so many. So the living example of the great teacher, the self-realized guru, was something that we hadn't seen. My background had been a Catholic background until maybe the age of 12 when I moved away from that. And then maybe the probing Western intellectual mind, philosophical, mystical, social, political. I even went through a phase where I called myself a mystical atheist because I believed in a higher awareness, but not necessarily the personal God of certain scriptures. Then at the level of practice, I picked up some of these practices, Kriya Yoga from the Yogananda's tradition, Atma Vichara, self-inquiry from Ramana Maharshi's tradition. And I got drawn into the Sanskrit language through the mantra, through the teachings, first with Upanishads, etc., Shankara's works with the Devanagari transliteration, all of that. And then later on into even the Rig Veda through Sri Aurobindo's work. But the curious thing, this was all before I had even been to India. It was only a few years later that I did go to India itself and learn more directly about these teachings and teachers. Very strong connection to the Ramana ashram of Ramana Maharshi, nearby to the Sri Aurobindo ashram in Pondicherry, but gradually to so many places. Then also in America, in my work with yoga Ayurveda, I was able to visit most of the ashrams, yoga ashrams there, from Kripalu, Yogaville to Yogananda traditions, all of that. So I could see what was happening at that level, Shivananda as well. And in India, I was able to meet some very great teachers. K. Natation at the Ramanashram was in his 80s, 90s when I knew him. And he had been a disciple of Ramana since the age of 12, and he had organized the works of Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni. But so many, Sadhguru Shivananda Murti and Vishakhapatnam, Swami Dayananda, mainly in Rishikesh, but also in Coimbatore. Even Ayurvedic doctors like Balavashta, Jyotishis like Dr. B.V. Raman, and Pramukh Swami, Swami Narayan, so many groups overall, I got to see the abundance and vastness of the teachings, Swami Vedabharati, Swami Abdeshananda. And so I could see how these were alive. I also visited so many of the sacred sites, Chardham, Kailas, Mansarovar, a lot of the temple cities in the south, in Tamil Nadu, Alandi by Pune, Jyotirlingas, Ujjain, Mahakal, Omkareshwara nearby, and even we had the Himalayas themselves, the Ganga. I went to all the different conjunctions with the Ganga above Rishikesh, Nepal, and Madhya Pradesh, and so many sites, almost every main state in India, all through Rajasthan, even Himachal Pradesh. So I also got to connect to Sanatana Dharma at a ground level. And then my friends and colleagues at Hinduism Today in Hawaii, Kauai, and their beautiful garden, tropical ashram in the mountains, waterfalls, all of that. And all along, I continued to study the teachings more deeply, Yoga Shastras, Vedanta Shastras, Ayurveda works, Jyotish works, contemporary authors, ancient authors, stotras. I have huge books on stotras, loves chanting stotras to the various devatas, particularly those of Adi Shankara, but many others as well. I became quite dedicated to Rig Veda and translated a significant part of that starting in my 20s. I also did extensive commentaries on Upanishads, even the older ones, which were quite interesting, study of all the Bija mantras, and then being involved in various teaching programs for various institutions, and also traveling worldwide, teaching and connecting to the devotees of the Sanatana Dharma, whether in Russia, whether in Brazil, in fact, almost on every continent throughout Europe, East and West, even Israel. So much was there. And then even the Hindu diaspora, I watched the Hindu population in America grow, bring in their temples, particularly Swami Narayan, that I've been closely associated with and helping with their educational displays. I did a tour of Hindu temples in UK for a month in 1996, and of course, throughout the world. So all of this helped me understand that there is a universal Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, we called it. It's also an eternal Dharma, because I could connect the Sanatana Dharma also with the ancient traditions, the Native Americans around us, the Navajo, the Hopi, the older European so-called pagan traditions, Greco-Roman, Celtic, Germanic, Slavic, Lithuanian, and so on. And then the older Egyptian, Babylonian, Persian, Iranian traditions, older Chinese traditions, and then also connecting with Buddhism, understanding that, being connected with Tibetan teachers, Chinese teachers, and seeing how these basic concepts like karma, rebirth, and practices, mantra meditation had gone global. But also with this, I came to understand how much Hindu Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, had been neglected and even denigrated in the Indian context, whether at a political level or at the level of education, and how much the confusion there has been about the Sanatana Dharma, and distortions when Sanatana Dharma is scaled down in the image of other traditions, which are not universal like that, which are caught up in an exclusive belief, a kind of eternal judgment of good or bad upon human beings, no sense of many lives, no sense of karma. So I also came into contact with that struggle. I have dealt with the left and the Marxist distortions, which are particularly notable on the India side, but also on the Chinese side. And then the vastness of art, music, dance, culture in the Sanatana Dharma has been an important draw. You find that in the temples. We also find that even in the performing arts today. And of course, the continued study of the psychology, the philosophy, the medicine, covering the whole of life, the cosmology, lokas of very subtle lokas up and beyond our physical world, a transformational universe overall, self-aware universe, this Paramatma overall, universal being, Satchitananda. These are some of the very prime concepts, insights, and inspirations, verified in meditation, verified in one's own daily practice, the anubhuti, the experience of the inner self, the connection with the inner being, the Atman or Purusha within, turning within, transcending the limitations of the outer reality, and recognizing that it is not just a choice. We are all part of this universal Sanatana Dharma. It is the universe itself. It is our deepest nature beyond time and space. It is our inner immortality, and is a great gift to humanity that we should share, that we should perpetuate, that we should protect and defend if necessary, but also expand with confidence and energy, because this is the higher truth that we must all aspire to, and all humanity must come back to it, has come from it. So let us honor the great rishis, gurus, shastras of the Sanatana Dharma, all their connections outwardly and inwardly, and bring that into our lives and share it with the world as a whole, starting in India, but moving beyond all boundaries, all limitations of time, place, and person, to that pure consciousness that is our inmost self and reality. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Hari Om Tat Sat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frauliji. In fact, when you ended your talk with Sri Guru Bhyo Nama, which you always do, and I felt like going before you and saying Guru Bhyo Nama, because your talk was so invigorating, and you talked about how Sanatana Dharma makes us be in touch with the pure consciousness that we call Brahman, that oneness that unites all sentient beings in this world. To continue this beautiful thought forward, I invite our second guest of the day. He is a classicist, he is a theater artist, he's a man of many talents actually. He is Dr. Bharara Gupta. He's a retired professor of English from Delhi University. He's a classicist, he's a polyglot, he's a theater theorist. He's also a sitar and surbahar player. He's a musicologist, he's a cultural analyst, and he's a writer and newspaper columnist. He has written extensively about the similarities between classical Greek drama and Sanskrit theatre, and what are the similarities and differences between them. He has studied the Indian or the Hindu sense of aesthetics, and what makes Sanatana Dharma the worshipper of everything that is beautiful, everything that is sublime, everything that's eternal. I would request Bharat Gupta to talk a little about the Hindu sense of aesthetics and how it binds Sanatan Dharma together. We see this sense of aesthetics, we see this sense of beauty in almost everything that the Hindus do, from the rangoli in front of their houses to the kind of food they cook and they serve it, to the kind of shringar that we offer to our gods and goddesses, to our attire, to our food, to our songs, to our temples, to everything. I would like Dr. Bharat Gupta to talk about the beauty of Sanatana Dharma and Sanatana Dharma in beauty.
Thank you, Shefali. I'm grateful that I have this opportunity to be present here in this dialogue and be in the company of such eminent and sincere seekers today. Uh, Now, I would certainly, as has been asked by Shefali, talk about how Sanatan Dharma becomes attractive, especially in the context of the art. Now, as a as an introduction, I'd just like to say a few things very briefly. Now, you see, we know something very usual about Sanatan Dharma, that there is not a single prophet, there are many rishis, many darshanas, and we have a diversity of modes of worship or paths of worship. As Pushpadanta said, Ruchinam Vaichitryat Riju Kutil Nana Pathajusham Nrinam Eko Gamya. That through diverse ways, which are straight or devious, human beings have finally to reach the one and the same goal. So, diversity of paths is one of the fundamental things in Indian tradition, and that is the background for diversity in art. I'll talk a little more about this. And the second aspect is that the whole tradition of India is based not just on belief or in philosophical instruction or what faith is supposed to be, but on realization, swanabhuti. So I may be a Vedanti, I may be a Sankhya believer, I may be a Aurobindoite, but all that I have read is not going to bring any realization to me. It's a sadhana which will bring a realization, and I will know only as much as I get to know through my sadhana. That is what I know. The rest is books, rest is mentioned, it is great words, it's all there. Now, that again is related to Indian arts, follow the same pattern. The point I'm trying to make is that the fundamentals of Indian philosophy are also the fundamentals of Indian kala or Indian aesthetics or pursuit of the arts. Now, one of the most important things is in Indian art, which is rooted in its philosophy, that the creator and the creation are not two, that they are not separate from each other, that they are manifestations of the same reality, that they are like word and meaning, as Kalidas said, Vagartha viva sampriktau. So, just as word and meaning are together, similarly, the creator and creation is together. And therefore, creation or this world is as real, as beautiful, as divine, as sacred as the creator. Now, in this respect, all Indian philosophies, whether it is the Vedantic karma, or it is Buddha, or it is Jaina, Kaivalyavada, or it is Sankhya, no matter which philosophy in India, they talk about this unity of creator and creation. And therefore, this creation becomes a doorstep to know the creator. Not that it is different, but that it is something which you know, because we are part of creation. We don't know the creator so well, so directly, but we know the creation all around us. We are part of it. And it is through that we get to know the ultimate. Now, this is the fundamental basis of Indian art again, because art is a pursuit which is like a lamp which you place on, let us say, the entrance of the door, or what is called the Dehri Dwar. It lights what is inside the room and it lights what is outside the room. So, art makes this world beautiful, and art makes and shows us the way to what is divinity. This is the fundamental function of Indian art. And in this respect, because of the philosophical diversity from, let us say, the Abrahamic religions, Indian religions are very different. or Indian art is very different. Because this world is divine, because this world is not just an image created by God in His own image, it is something which is God. It is something which is divine, and therefore, the whole concept of making a murti or making an icon is not something which can ever be false or which can ever deviate us from the true nature of divinity as is proclaimed in Christianity and Islam. And therefore, this huge history of iconoclasm which has existed in this world. Therefore, in India, there has been no room for iconoclasm because every icon is beautiful, every murti is beautiful, every artistic expression is beautiful. Now, art, therefore, in its own creation and through the creation of art, elevates. You see, the purpose of Indian art is not to settle certain social messages. Unlike, let us say, the Marxist art, which says that, well, we have to use art in order to create a doorway or a pathway to revolution, that we want to reform this world. And therefore, we are doing art. Art is not a reality in itself, it is something which teaches us about revolution. But that's not the Indian idea. The Indian idea is that the art, of course, teaches us about this world, but art also elevates. And by elevation, it gives us a direct experience here and now. And that experience has been called as rasa, as something which brings about an elevation, a sophistication, a sattvic upsurge here and now. And that sattvic upsurge is so special, then it gives us an inkling of what is even higher. So art becomes, unlike, let us say, the Greek philosopher Plato's philosophy, art is something that does not lead us away from truth, but leads us to the truth. It leads us, it's a doorway to the truth. It leads us to moksha. It leads us to something higher, and that is the purpose of art, as well as the purpose of art is instruction. But all this elevation, all this diversity of philosophy, all this unity between the different paths of India, the diversity of the paths, what does it aim at? What is it meant for? So, Sanatan Dharma, therefore, has always pointed out that there are certain objectives of life. Why do you live in this world? What do you do? What is the purpose of your being here? And that purpose was for ages and ages defined in four purusharthas of dharma, karma, adharma, kama, dharma, artha, kam, and moksha. So, art is something which has to give us dharma, artha, kam, and moksha. And art is something which has to teach us about these things. Therefore, the contradiction that very often comes in the wake of certain Western philosophical systems, that is art for instruction or is art for art's sake. You see, that kind of a contradiction has not existed in India. I mean, this was a contradiction very early in the Greek mind. So Aristotle went one way, Plato went another way. This was the contradiction in the Christian world, where the Christian world thought that art was falsifying the truth. God had created man in his own image, and man should not create another image because that is the work of the devil. And therefore, art was bad, and therefore, iconoclasm was right. So, India has not any room for this kind of confusion. because creation is divine. To recreate on the basis of that creation, to make another world, for me to be a Brahma as an artist, just as Brahma has created this universe, so I, whether a man or a woman, whether somebody speaking Sanskrit or Prakrit or Tamil or Bangla, I can also create. I am also a Kavi, and I am also a creator in this world who, through art, creates and brings about rasa, which is for elevation. Now, these are some of the fundamental values enshrined in the Sanatan Dharma, and they are followed by all sects of India. They are not Brahminical. They are not followed just by followers of Veda or Karma Kand. They are not followed just by Bauddhas or by Jains or by Shaktas or by yogis or by bhaktas. No, they are followed by everybody. So, if music is something which leads you to the higher level, Veena Vadan Tattvagyo, Jati Shruti Visharadaha, Talagyo Aprayasena, Mokshamargam Niyachati. So, this is true for Jainas also. They have written great treatises on the value of art. Bauddhas have written great plays. Shaivas have written, and Vaishnavas, of course, have written hundreds and hundreds of works of art and Puranas in order to continue with the Vedic message through elevation and through creation of rasa. Now, these are some of the very fundamental values which not just modern India, which is right now lost in this new wave of consumerism and present day consumerism, not just India, but I think the whole world needs to ponder over that the message of Indian art is bringing people together, bringing people of the whole world together because of its certain fundamental principles, which are not just talked about, which are not ideological, but which are experienced. So, Indian art is experiential. It brings us to the four Purusharthas, which are beautiful and which can be pursued by people all over the world. And the last thing that I have to say is that today, unfortunately, we have a conflict between some proselytizing religions, namely Islam and Christianity, and Hinduism or pagans, or, I include the African tribals and Australian and all these people together as so called pagans. So we have a conflict. And in order to resolve that conflict, Indian art based on Sanatan values, Sanatan Dharma, is the most useful thing. I'm very glad for a patient listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bharat Gupji. And that was a extremely enlightening talk. And I loved the metaphor that you used, that Indian art, and for that matter, Indian philosophy, is like the lamp that's lit on the dahlias, so that it lights up outside as well as it lights up the light within. That is such a powerful metaphor and such a beautiful way of putting the message across. In fact, the one thing that I got from your talk and from the readings that I have been reading about Sanatana Dharma is that it is an experiential philosophy that is at once universal but at once intensely personal. Universal because it is applicable to all sentient beings, and personal because, as Bharat Gupta pointed out, that it is not complete without Swanubhuti. My experience is not the same as your experience. My journey is not the same as your journey, even though the path we have chosen may be the same, but our journey will be still different because your experience is different and my experience is different. That is a remarkable takeaway, I think. And every student of Sanatana Dharma, every traveler on this path of eternal truth would do well to remember this. Now I would move to our next guest. She is a very interesting person. She is a English Behan. I just love that handle, and I love your YouTube show, actually, YouTube channel. And you have Melissa Kapoor. She tweets as English Behan. She also has a YouTube channel called English Behan. She's an Oxford-trained scientist and PhD, Dr. Melissa Kapoor. She married an Indian and then discovered the beauty of Sanatana Dharma. She's active on her YouTube channel, English Behan, disseminating her experiences of Hinduism. I would like you to talk about how your journey has been in exploring Sanatana Dharma, and specifically because you come from a different belief system and you have embraced Sanatana Dharma. And there is a lot of propaganda, or there's a lot of misconceptions that are being spread, particularly by vested interest, against Sanatana Dharma by saying that Sanatana Dharma is very against women. It is not, a equal rights religion. It oppresses women and all of that. So I would like you to talk about how your experience has been as a sadhaka, as a seeker, as well as a woman in discovering Sanatana Dharma.
Dhanyavad, Shefali ji. And wow, Bhara ji, your talk, it really filled me with so much happiness, and I felt so empowered listening to it. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to Jaipur Dialogues for inviting me to speak. It's really, truly an honor. So yes, my discovery of Sanatana Dharma. So it began, as Shefali ji just mentioned, when I met my husband, but it might be worth me just going back to who I was before then. So as you can tell, my family is European through and through, and I was brought up as a Christian. I mean, it was quite a mild Christian upbringing, I would guess, as most of Christians are in the UK. In fact, the percentage of people in the UK who say they are strong Christians, it's really falling off the cliff. When you look at the attendance at church on a regular basis, you're down into tiny, tiny numbers. And those people who do attend church regularly, they are sort of people aged 70 plus. So in the next generation, basically many churches are dilapidated, falling down in the UK. I just want people to realize that in India, because they probably don't understand that when they see churches popping up in India all the time. In the UK, it's completely dying a death. But yes, brought up as a mild Christian. I must admit, I was more focused really on being very studious, doing well at school. I was very hardworking, very much into sport, and I was a very accomplished person. I was very confident because I had done so many wonderful things, achieved so much, and ultimately I was very happy. There was nothing really missing from my life, or so I thought. But at the same time, I did appreciate that life was a bit dull, a bit grey, not just like the clothes people wear, the food you eat. All food you eat in the West is beige, essentially. But when I was doing my PhD, I would spend my time just sitting in front of the computer coding the whole time, and it felt a bit like sensory deprivation. And that's why, listening to Bharatji just a moment ago, talking about the beauty of art, it fills me with so much life. I find so much energy. Another way in which my life wasn't complete, I was happy, but maybe not complete, was that I always had this fear of speaking out, of offending, of upsetting people. I was always brought up to believe you should have moderate views and never offend anyone. Even if you can see something is wrong, you should just go with the flow. So that's just another thing for me to point out that has changed. And then another way in which I was back then is that I was sort of rejecting femininity. And that's because in the West, women have been severely oppressed for hundreds of years, thousands of years. So there's been this sort of backlash to the opposite extreme there, where you want to remove any femininity, anything to do with being female from your life. So that is why, at school, I went to an all-girls school, but we were led to believe that to become the movers and shakers of the future, we had to almost be devoid of our feminineness. And we had to go into science and technology, even though, my best subjects at school were like art and dance, and they came very naturally to me. But in the end, I chose science and technology because they were, the men's subject, going into the men's world. That was where we were told we would need to move into to become successes. So now, having met my husband after this upbringing and beginning to understand and discover Hinduism, I'm now going to just reflect on some of the benefits, the direct benefits that I've experienced. So the first benefit, and it came quite immediately actually on my first visit to India, was that I realized just how much life there is, and it gave me a new lease of life. It came quite sort of superficially at first, and just seeing the color on the buildings, in the markets, on the clothes people are wearing, the saris, just how much color there is. When you come from the London Underground, where everyone's just wearing grey and black, and then you come to India and everyone's wearing green and red, and it's just yellow, and it's just my eyes just popped out of my face almost. And then family and friends, neighbors, they would gather and have parties with music and dancing and the most tasty food of all colors under the rainbow. And so I just felt this new lease of life. And when you watch the classic Hindi movies, all of the songs in there, nearly all of them, they have the word zindagi in there. Everything is about life. When you compare it to films in the West and modern Bollywood films now, it's not life, it's lust really. All these songs are about. It's such a contrast. There's so much sincere innocence and such beauty in just celebrating life. And then later on, having now delved deeper into the scriptures, I understand this celebrating life on a much deeper level, how it's celebrating that connectedness, that everything is one, the animals, the plants, everything is connected, the universe. And so again, that has been such a revelation to understand that life expands so much beyond just humans. Because growing up as in the Abrahamic tradition and way of thinking, you see humans as being very different from animals and the rest of life. It's like they're there as your toys, almost as your resources. Whereas Hinduism doesn't see it that way at all. We're all connected. If you're hurting an animal, you're hurting yourself as well. It's all connected. The second direct benefit I've experienced is that I am much more courageous and I have much greater mental strength. So at first it was through Vedanta, and then through learning about the Bhagavad Gita, it really helped me to learn how to put things into perspective. And that helped change my worldview in a big way, in ways like appreciating the large time scales that the universe is operating on. Again, when you come from the Abrahamic tradition and from the West, everything really that's happened in the world seems to have happened in the last 2,000 years. It's almost like nothing happened before then. And yet when you learn about Hinduism and the ancient scriptures and the eternalness of the Vedas, it puts things into completely a different perspective. And not just the time dimension of things, but like the space dimension of things, where in an infinite universe or multi-universes, these are concepts that are very consistent with Hinduism. And again, they just help you to realize that you are actually quite a small part in a much, much, much bigger design and creation and mechanism. So anything that is impacting you on a day-to-day basis, you really don't need to worry about it too much, because it's probably not anything big at all. On the grand scale of things, it might seem very big at the time, but probably tomorrow you yourself would have forgotten about it. And just holding on to that point about large time frames and large space, and how Hinduism is all very consistent with those concepts. And I must admit, having come from a science background, it's been very easy for me to sort of latch on to these ideas, because I am obviously trained to follow empirical evidence and to look for consistency and to look for logic and ideas and arguments. So, seeing all of these concepts and comparing it then to the Bible, where there are so many inconsistencies and just, untruths, it's been a very easy transfer into Hinduism for me, being a scientist. Another way in which it's empowered me and made me stronger is that, particularly learning through Vedanta and the Bhagavad Gita, learning to detach from things and to see the ego in incidents, and particularly in how you respond to incidents. That's been very useful, I would say, on a day-to-day practical basis. And particularly also to learn that, or to know in the back of your mind that you are already saved. If something goes wrong, if you make a mistake, if you upset someone, you're not damned for forever. You are saved. Okay, you might need to live out more life cycles to undo your karma and to learn lessons, but that's just part of your individual journey of discovery and self-development. So in all these ways, it's given me the courage to set up a business, to deal with family matters, to launch English Behen and speak out on behalf of Hindus. And it's given me the understanding also that it's good to have strong views, particularly when it's along the lines of what is dharmic in the world and what are lies being spewed out. As I mentioned before, I was always taught that you should have a very moderate stance and not upset or insult anyone. But when the earth is being damaged or people are being killed unjustly, and lies are being spewed, then it's your duty to speak out. I've learned that as a Hindu, and it's given me the courage to do that. And that's particularly important as a woman. And this brings me on to my final direct benefit, is that it's made me a courageous woman. And Hindus are incredibly brave. If you look back throughout history, from Ma Sita, she was so brave in her way. Draupadi, such clear thinking, all the way through to more modern times with Jhansi Ki Rani and Rani Durgavati. So many examples of these brave, brave women. And then when you look at Shakti, and particularly on the nights of Navratri, I just love Navratri because every evening you're worshipping a different sort of facet, a different characteristic of women. And it's everything from being a caring mother, such as Ma Shailaputri, all the way through to being a fierce warrioress in Ma Kali, and everything in between. And that's just so empowering, because in the West, there was historically the idea that women had to be meek and mild. And then there's been this backlash so that you either become ultra feminine and you're wearing really tarty clothes and high heels, or you reject femininity completely and you almost become devoid of gender. When actually you need to have a balance of all of the different characteristics, and none of them are exclusively female or feminine. You need them all, because at times you do need to be fierce. There are times where you do need to be peaceful. There are times where you do need to be caring and nurturing. So that is a balanced human being. And that is just so empowering, because as I said before, it almost felt like I had to be boxed into being a kind of person with a kind of temperament. And that's just so unnatural and so unhealthy. So in so many ways, becoming a Hindu has had so many benefits to me. And I think I probably will close there, Shefali ji. Is that okay?
Yeah, that was beautiful, and it was a remarkable journey. And I'm glad how you pointed out that it's made you a braver person. It has liberated you. Being a Sanatan Dharmi has liberated you in many ways, and that was very good to hear as a fellow traveler on this path. Now from English Behan we go to American Behan, who is very popular on Twitter actually. Renne Lynn. She's an activist, author, columnist, and founder, Voice for India. Renne was born and raised in New Jersey, America. She is best known for raising issues and awareness about India's political and social issues. And particularly, she is very upfront about dealing with the misinformation that is being spread about Hindus and Hindu Dharma constantly. Traveling all over the world, Renne has seen many different cultures, but the one life-changing experience of her life, she says, was her trip to India and her journey in Sanatana Dharma. Welcome, Renne, and I would like you to talk about one, how your own journey as a Sanatana Dharmi has been, and secondly, you have been trying really hard to bust many misconceptions and many falsehoods being spread about Dharma. So, how has that experience been for you? in how was it to deal with all the lies and falsehoods?
Oh, thank you. Oh, everybody's talk was just wonderful, hearing your stories and experience. And thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be here. So first, I just like to talk about my journey into Sanatan Dharma. And it's just, for me, it was a really divine experience because like Melissa G, you know, I was raised a Christian, a little bit different than her story. Hers was more mild. I came from a background of Christianity that was a little bit kind of radical. So, which kind of put a lot of anxiety, and that's exactly what it does. It puts a lot of anxiety and fear into people. So, and like, it's only in Christianity and Islam, your beliefs are either Jesus or Allah. And if you don't accept that, then you burn in hell. So it was a lot of torture, you know, to try to become this perfect person and to try to live a sin-free life according to the pastors, which was so, it's not realistic. So and it was in this search that I was saying to myself, how could this be? And mind you, I've been a Catholic, I've been a Baptist, I've been evangelical, I've been Pentecostal, you name it, I've been to every single church. So I question, you know, all this religion. How is it possible that the whole entire world is going to go to hell if they don't accept Jesus as their personal savior? Logically, to me, it doesn't make sense. And then traveling around the world and seeing like so many different countries, and especially India, and I fell in love with India and the culture and the people. And not to be biased, but the Indian people are one of the nicest, kindest people in the world. And I was like, logically, this doesn't make sense. And when I started questioning and researching and just trying to find the truth, and when I started learning about Sanatan Dharma, it's kind of like sorting ourselves out. What are we doing here? Who we are? You know, making ourselves a better person. So the concept, it's totally different. It's like oneness with God. Everything is only Brahman. So, and with Christianity and Islam, it's like you're separate from God. And if you sin and don't live according to what the pastors tell you, if you don't go to church, then you're separated from God. And I even had one incident in my life that I was excommunicated from the church. And instead of, this is what they do to try to shame you, instead of telling you personally, you know, behind closed doors, however you want to say, you know, you're a sinner, we don't like the way you're dressing, you're listening to secular music. So one day at church, the church actually publicly humiliated me for the whole church. And they said, Renne is a sinner and we don't want her to come to church. She's not a member here. We're going to excommunicate her. And I remember sitting there and I was just flabbergasted. I just could not believe how the way they operate, even inside the church, where they put so much guilt and fear into your life. And it really does. And my theory is a lot of people in America, they're very sick They have a lot of depression. They have a lot of anxiety. And I truly believe, this is my opinion only, I truly believe a lot of it is stemmed from the way these pastors, priests are teaching about the Bible and hell and putting so much fear into people. It's like a form of manipulation and control. So when I became a Hindu and I started exploring Hinduism, and at that time, it's so different from Christianity. It's extremely esoteric compared to Christianity. And even though it was so esoteric, I still kept up with it because I was asking myself questions and I was exploring, why are we here? And that's exactly what Sanatan Dharma is. And it was so weird, that connection I had. And I remember one time I went to, I'm in New Jersey, so we have the biggest Indian population here in the whole United States. I go to an Indian fair, food, jewelry, all kinds of things from India. And this lady there, she gave me a pamphlet on Hinduism. And I was just reading it, and that's what started my whole journey into it. And it was just simple tenets like non-violence and vegetarianism that really struck the core to me, because a lot of religions, they sacrifice animals in the name of religion. It's painful, it's violent. Like, it's not human. It just seems, this violence soaked in blood, and people are eating it. So it was just simple principles like this that I found so profound. As simple as it is, it's just so profound. And I said, this really is life. This makes sense to me. So miraculously, I just happened to become a vegetarian overnight. It wasn't a slow process for me. It was just, it's like I just had like this, it was like, boom, I just woke up and I became a vegetarian, and it was the best thing that happened to me. And because it's so divine when you become a vegetarian, just like it's so divine when you do yoga. When I do my yoga practice, it really is divine. It really does connect you. Same thing with vegetarianism. It does connect you. It makes you more human, emotional, more in touch with the environment. So, and eating, also the whole science about eating a vegetarian diet, it puts you in a higher levels, because if you're eating the meat, it has a low frequency, where a vegetarian diet, I don't know if I'm saying this right, it puts you in higher frequency, the food. So I'm a big preacher of vegetarianism. So that was another reason that I started learning, and I became a Hindu, and just the whole philosophy of Sanatan Dharma was so different. And I'm still learning. I love it. I mean, David Frawley's one of my favorite. I just love him. I got his Ayurvedic book, and so that's how my journey became into Hinduism, Sanatan Dharma. And of course, India had a big impact on that too, traveling around the world and seeing different cultures and people. And there's just something so interesting about India and the people and the culture. I just fell in love with it. And I learn more every time I go there, and just being around my friends. And that's why I started the voice for India too. Because I noticed a lot of Hindus in India were getting discriminated against. So I started my voice for India to debunk the media. And I wrote 2 books about India. One mainly is about the prime minister, and the other one is about my journey in India and the mainstream media, and how we need to debunk the mainstream media, because they say so many negative things about Hindus. And even here, for some reason, they think that they can abuse Hindus. And me, for one, with no Indian ethnicity in me, I was actually abused as a Hindu in one of my government positions for being a vegetarian and a Hindu. So even in America, believe it or not, we are still getting discriminated as a Hindu. So I don't tolerate things like that. That's why I'm very vocal on Twitter and Facebook and standing up and supporting India and getting the truth about India and Hindus. So I had actually got a lawyer, and we ended up suing the state of New Jersey for religious discrimination. And I won that lawsuit, and I was so happy because, you know, we have to stand up for Hindu Dharma. We have to stand up. So we can't sit on the sidelines and be silent spectators. We have to raise our voice loud. And once and for all, how many more Hindu genocides do we need? How many more temples do we need burned down? How many more Hindus do we need slaughtered in Pakistan? That's why we all need to get loud, and we all need to be vocal and get our points out there. That's why I write my book. That's why I sued the state of New Jersey, because if we all sit on the sidelines as silent spectators, what is going to get, I mean, how are we standing up for Hindus? We really do get smacked on a lot, not just in India, it's happening here. So I always get out on social media to encourage my fellow Hindu brothers and sisters. We have to be Hindu warriors. We have to get out there, and we have to fight for Hindu Dharma and save it, because there was enough Hindus being killed all around the world, a lot of them in Islamic countries. And, you know, I think it's crucial that we be vocal, because the media here is so corrupt. It really is corrupt. I'm still trying to figure out whose media is worse, India or United States. I mean, it's really bad, and they don't say accurate things about India and, you know, with the Hindus. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I guess I end up with that. So I hope I answered your questions. Oh, I can't.
Right, that all of us, we need to speak up, because we are the only civilization in the world that has actually survived. There were other ancient civilizations which have now just become an exhibit in a museum. You talk about Greek civilization, you talk about Egyptian civilization, you talk about the Mayan, Incan, whoever. Now they're just exhibits in a museum, but we are living. We still survive, and that is what our detractors don't like about us. So that is why there is such a sustained campaign of calumny and lies that's directed against Hindu Dharma. But as they say that Dharma is eternal, Dharma is without beginning and without end, and Dharma is like the ever flowing waters of the Ganga. It changes every moment, but yet it remains the same. That is the quality of Dharma. I'll now open the floor for questions. There is a question specifically for Bharat Gupta, and there's a question which I would like to ask both Melissa and Renne, because even though both of you come from a different belief system, your experiences have been different, because Melissa has been a mildly practicing Christian. So for her, probably the transition was easier than for Renne, who came from a very radical Christian background. So my question to Bharat Gupta is, could you talk, this was a question asked by one of the viewers. He wants you to talk a little about the spiritual tradition of Indian music, particularly with reference to Samaveda Gayan, and how it morphed into Indian classical music and the Drupad singing.
Well, thank you. This is a very frequently asked question. Many people think that this is just some kind of a hocus pocus created by Brahmins, and it is not historically true in terms of the growth of a art. practical growth of a system. But that's not true. You see, in ancient times, very ancient times, and throughout, because we have preserved the ancient system of singing the Vedas, the Samagana, we have had two kinds of music. One is the music of singing the Vedic text. The Vedic text is found in Rig Veda, but when it is sung, it becomes Samgan. And then, at the same time, the ancient time when Samgan was being sung and Vedic yajnas were being held, we had another music, worldly music or Laukic music, which was called Gandharva. And Gandharv means something which belongs to the area of Gandhar, the present day Afghanistan, where music is forbidden now. So that was the the origin of Indian music. So the most ancient text on Indian music, Natya Shastra, says about Gandharva, or the ancient name for Indian music, Yonir Bhaved Ganam. That the origin of this comes from Gan or Samgan. Now, Vedas were sung in three notes. The part like Pavakana Saraswati Vaji Bhir Vajnevati. This is just three notes. But Samgan was seven notes. And from that seven notes, we had the system of seven notes with huge variety, with another set of notes, with all kinds of what is now called ragas, but which was called jatis in ancient times. We had tremendous variety. But what was the purpose? The purpose was the same, which was to please the gods. You see, this question was asked in terms of what is the spiritual background. So when you sing the hymn to God, when you sing the hymn to Devata through song, then it is said that Devatas are most pleased when the hymn is sung to them in Samgana. They are not pleased so much as when it is recited in Rik, Yajur, or Atharva style. But when it is sung in Sam, then they are most pleased. So, music is something which brings us closest to the divine. This is the earliest recorded belief and practice in India. And this came into all kinds of different musics for thousands of years. It evolved. And the oldest surviving form of Laukik or worldly music that we have is called Drupad. Now, there were ancient Dhruvas also in Vedic times. I have just completed a long article which would be very soon published next week on this whole evolution. The Dhruvas were sung in praise of Shiva, in praise of Devis, in praise of all other Devatas. And they were done along with Vedic yajnas. And it is from then that the tradition of Dhruvapad evolved as Brij Bhasha Dhrupad in 12th and 13th century, patronized by Man Singh Tomar. It was the Brij Bhasha Drupad, which concentrated in the language of that region, which was Brij Bhasha. So this is, you can listen to my various videos on this on my channel, but this is a brief answer to your question.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. Now, I have a question for both Melissa and Renne. This particularly because you're both women and both of you have had your own individual journeys while discovering Sanatana Dharma. There is a lot of propaganda that is being spread, systematic misinformation campaign, which tries to tell people that Hindu Dharma is misogynistic, it is oppressive towards women, and they always cite things like sati, and they'll call it Brahmanical patriarchy, and they'll throw terms like that, basically trying to tell you that being a Hindu woman is being forced to be in the kitchen 24 by 7 and to pop out babies. That is the kind of image that is deliberately been people, the detractors of Hindu Dharma, have tried to portray. So when you first started to discover Sanatana Dharma, my question to you is, were you somewhere affected by this misinformation campaign? How did it change your mind? And what did you finally really discover? What has your Swanubhava been about Hindu Dharma and the status of women?
Shall I take that one first, Renne ji?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Excellent question, Shefali ji. So growing up, to be honest, it was almost like India and Hinduism didn't exist. So we didn't learn about it at school. In fact, I had 2 Hindu friends, but it was almost like I didn't know they were Hindu at the time, which I know sounds crazy. So I probably didn't have too many preconceptions growing up, and maybe that's why the sort of becoming a Hindu came so easily to me, because I didn't have any preconceptions, and that is why I can see the logic and the beauty in it so easily. But then again, I mean, certainly now that I'm an adult and looking on it, I can see the propaganda out there. And I mean, a recent event just this week that's really angered many Hindus in the UK is that, and it's a group of Indian women. They've created a campaign on the London Underground where they've put up billboards. Basically, they say they're standing in solidarity with rape victims, but the message it's portraying is that India is the rape capital of the world. So they don't realize the damage they are doing. So all really we can do is put out the truth, put out these statistics where you see the sort of the chart of the ranking of like prevalence of rape in different countries, and you see India way down the bottom, down there somewhere. So giving people the truth is, the first step. But often I find that people just won't believe it. And in fact, it's not so much people in the UK I find who don't believe it, it's people in India, which I know sounds so crazy, but it's the truth. I mean, I mentioned earlier about having courage and speaking the truth, and how important it's been for me to have mental strength, because actually our major battles on a day-to-day basis in my day-to-day life is with family and friends in India, trying to help them to mentally decolonize and to not be so deracinated and not to be believing all the lies out there. These are the people who are actually, I find, are most stubborn. They won't listen, and it's just so sad and so frustrating, and it breaks families apart. That's all I can say. So as I said, I would say in the UK there is propaganda out there, but I find people, they maybe are more open-minded to listening to the truth than they are in India.
It's ironic, but I have to agree with you, sadly. What you're saying is absolutely true, unfortunately. Renne, what has been your experience?
Yeah, actually, before I even came to India, because I'm a world traveler, I love to travel. So you hear and you believe these things, statistics, what you're reading. So it's like the same thing. And even the people here, that they think just like what you said, that, Hindu women are treated poorly in India. They're only there to cook and pop out babies. And we over here in America, they have that same perception of women, because I read it. I even talk to people here, and they actually believe that is true. And even in the beginning, I did too. This is going back some time when I started traveling, and then when I went to India. But actually, that is far from the truth, because all my women friends in India, they're highly educated. They're driving. They can do whatever they want. They're not under like some strict law. So this perception that Hindu women are stricken, from educating themselves and having, going out with their friends and so forth, is so far from the truth. And you hear that, like what Melissa said with the rape. I mean, it's really sad that they say that India is the rape capital of the world. And in my book, India Stripped, I did a lot of extensive research, and That is the farthest from the truth that you could ever imagine. India, out of 147, I can't, I don't have my book on hand, 127 countries or something. It's way down on the list. So again, it's all propaganda by the media to try to put this bad perception about the Hindus in India. And, you know, they say that, but yet, you know, the Christians here, it's in the Bible that man is head of the household. And you look at these Christian couples that are married here that are really strict in the church and members and all that. They actually, their husband's the head of the household. They don't have say about anything. Whatever the husband says, it is law, and you go by that only. So I feel that even seeing my friends who are married in India, it's not like that. So it's really sad that people have this false perception about how women are living in India. And then one last point I want to make is what really just makes me so mad, off the top, angry, is when CNN and the Redder Thomas Foundation comes out and say that India, the women in India are treated so bad. As the #1 country, women in India are treated the worst. But Pakistan is better, Iraq is better, Iran is better, Yemen is better. Are you kidding me? You're telling me that women in these Islamic countries that are walking around with chains on their feet, that don't wear their hijab correctly, are getting beaten in the streets in Iran, that can't do anything, that are being forced to marry at 14 years old. You're telling me that these women are not oppressed, but they are happier and living a much freer life than the women in India. You have got to be kidding me. And the pity thing about it is people actually believe this lies. This is how dangerous the media has become. The media is the enemy of the people. And guess what? They are getting worse and worse. Media and big tech, they should be ashamed of themselves. These people are despicable. Long gone are the old days of real journalism. These people have a propaganda and one propaganda only. And it's really despicable and sickening what these people are doing. And a lot of it, they like to attack the Hindus and India. That's why I say we need to raise our voice and get vocal.
You're absolutely right. In fact, Conrad Elst had said once that the problem that Hinduism's detractors or Sanatan Dharma's detractors have is that we are still alive, we are still living. If we were relics in a museum, they would be kinder to us. Then they would probably write nice essays about how Hindu Dharma was a good philosophy, how there were good things. But the problem that they have is that we have defied everything. We have defied every invasion. We have defied every genocide. Okay, we have depleted, we have lost numbers, but the fact is we are still here, we're still thriving, and that is what really, really rankles people. And that is why there is a sustained campaign of misconception and misinformation that is carried out against Dharma. I would like to ask Bharat Gupta one question, which is as the world moves towards a higher spiritual plane, it does not matter where people are, but they naturally start following. They may not call themselves Hindus or Sanatana Dharmis, but they start following things that Hindu Dharma preaches, like meditation, like yoga, like vegetarianism, like being kinder to sentient beings, like consuming less. All these are basically Hindu yama and niyamas that are given to us by the sages. So, what solutions does Sanatana Dharma have for global problems of the present and of the future? Do we have any solutions at all?
You see, the solution to the human situation is dharma. Whether you live in one corner of the world or you live in another corner of the world. So, if you are dharmic, then your life becomes better. Now, there is one way of putting it in older Indian language, but then there is a modern way of putting it. And the modern way is that in the 21st century, we have to rethink and reinterpret. Now, this task of reinterpreting our so called revered texts, some people call it scriptures. In India, we don't call them scriptures, we call them great words spoken by the ancient sages and etc. But we still have to reinterpret them for our present time today. Now, Sanatan Dharma and Indian philosophical traditions are one tradition which repeatedly say that rules of conduct must change with time and place. And rules of conduct have to be adjusted. Now, a good deal of the world believes in a revelation which is not to be questioned. They believe in an interpretation which is not to be discussed, which is not to be analyzed. On the contrary, the Indian tradition is that whenever you come up with a new system of thought, you have to lay it and make it analytical, and you have to lay it bare before others to be analyzed and to be discussed. So, if we are going to look into the 21st century, if we are going to look ahead, then we have to rethink on all the various classical texts of the world, the scriptures, and the thoughts that we have discussed. And it is here that Sanatan Dharma has shown the way, because Sanatan Dharma has been doing it all its life. Sanatana Dharma has been doing this for thousands of years. There was the Vedic system of karma, kand, and yajna, but Buddha said, I don't believe in this. I'm going to give you an alternate. People said, fine, do live that. We don't want to obstruct you. And then a time came when the two coalesced. Then somebody else comes up with a philosophy. Now, this is what is necessary for the modern world. I find that the so-called tradition of enlightenment around 18th, 19th century of age of reason, which once prevailed in Europe, that has almost disappeared. And it has disappeared from Europe, it has disappeared from America, as you can see in the result of the last election in America. It has simply disappeared. And it has disappeared largely in the Islamic world, where everything is seen in terms of either blasphemy or submission. Either there is Islam, which means submission, or there is blasphemy. Either me or the other. Now, Sanatan Dharma does not believe in the other. The whole concept of the other, something different from me, does not exist. You and I are one. And right from very ancient time, from Vedic texts to the modern, medieval to the modern, we have hundreds of verses and sayings of saints and poets and philosophers who talk about the singleness of life. One of these ladies just mentioned that animals are not considered as somebody separate. In Christianity, you have a chain of being. There is God at the top and devil at the bottom, and there are somewhere human beings, and then birds and reptiles and snake and this and that. There is a chain of being, and in the 19th century, they used to put the black man as lower than the white man and things like that. Now, for Sanatan Dharma, I may be born as a lizard in my next life. Now, even if you say that this is hocus pocus, I'm trained to look upon a lizard as a creature which I should allow to live in my drawing room. I should not just poison her out or pull them out, but I should let them live. And when I will let them live, I will realize that they are eating insects, they are eating things harmful to me, and they are beneficial to me. So, this great interdependence has been one of the greatest features of Sanatan Dharma. The whole concept that the environment we owe an obligation to environment, that we are obliged to the environment. Environment means the physical world, the world of other creatures, the world of nature. And I think in this corona time, we have to seriously think about it. That there is somewhere we have, distorted our perspective so much that we are in a state of great imbalance. So I think Sanatan Dharma has not survived just because it was a beautiful doctrine, but it was a very practical way of life, and it can be something useful to others.
Very true. Uh, as we see globally that people all around the world, as they start getting more aware of what is happening around them, as they start getting more aware of the circle of life and how it is interlinked, how they, when they evolve to a higher plane, they naturally gravitate towards a Sanatan Dharmic lifestyle. They may not call themselves Hindu, but the several things that they adopt in their daily lives, like veganism, like meditation, like yoga, are all Hindu concepts. So they're practicing Hinduism, they're practicing Dharma, even though they may not officially call themselves Hindu. But at the same time, in India, we have a generation of deracinated, young, particularly urban Hindus who are born Hindus, but who do not feel any connection, any spiritual connection with the belief system of their ancestors. So they take pride in spouting meaningless stuff like I am spiritual but not religious without knowing what either of the words mean. So you three come from very different experiences, all three of you come from very different points of view. I would like to know your opinions about how we can change this, and how we can make the Indians, the younger Indian Hindus, more aware of Hindu Dharma. In fact, when I went to Chinmaya Mission museum in Pune, the first thing that struck me really was the first sentence by Swami Chinmayananda, where he said that my mission is to convert Hindus to Hinduism. I think it is time that all of us have to do that and convert Hindus to Hindu Dharma in our own way. But how do you think we can do that? I would like the opinion of all three of you. Maybe, give practical suggestions if you can.
Yeah, actually, I've noticed that in India with the youth, a lot of it is they're getting a very liberal education. They don't even know anything about Hindu Dharma, so that's really sad. And another thing is they think it's so cool to emulate the West. So, out here in the West, it's easily, have some beef for dinner, chicken, pork. So now, even when I talk to my friends in India, a lot of these young people, I don't know what is going on in their mind that now the Hindus are eating all kinds of meat because they think it's cool, because they think that if they emulate everything in the West, that they're cool. And it's now, I've seen so much in the last 10 years in India that Hinduism is so uncool. God forbid, Islam is cool, Christianity is cool. Oh no, it's all stems from all this liberalism that's going in India. Why the youth are just like flocking it to the Western counterparts way of living. And even in 10 years, my first visit to India was in January in 2009. I can tell you from today, it changed just in 10 years. It changed drastically. When I was first going to use, you would see women, even in Delhi and big cities, the women were more into wearing traditional Indian clothings, and they would be proper and well mannered. Now, when I walk the streets in Delhi, because I stay in Delhi when I'm in India, the women there are half naked. And I'm saying to myself, the dramatic that happened in 10 years is mind blowing. These women are walking around half naked. Like, I like their body parts are all hanging out. They're walking on the street, they're cussing filthy languages. They're walking around with a cigarette in their hand. So, I mean, if we don't get a hold of it now, it's only going to get worse and worse, because it's grown by leaps and bounds, this secularism or this liberal way of life or Western way of life. So I think a lot of it, which I don't know, it's possible to change, is a lot of it has to do with the school education system there. And a lot of it is the parents. It seems like the parents aren't teaching their kids, you know, Hindu Dharma. Maybe they're busy, or maybe they're just emulating the West too. So I think if they can connect that, you know, eating meat and start learning about yoga and meditation and all these ancient, beautiful wisdom and knowledge in India, how it really is life-saving. Because I can tell them from just my experience, you know, living in America my whole entire life, and I used to eat meat, how I took hold of the ancient Hindu wisdom, meditation, yoga, vegetarianism, and how it changed my mind dramatically. So I think we can all give our points, talking points on how it changes us. So I can tell them, look, it really is divine. It really is magic doing yoga and meditation and becoming a vegetarianism, put you on higher levels, and it really connects you with the universe. And one last point I want to make, I think it's so divinely needed. When you start doing yoga and becoming a vegetarian, I can't explain it. It's like magic. You become so in touch, more in tune with yourself and the universe. I have so much compassion since I became a vegetarian, started doing yoga, that sometimes I'll just start crying. If I'm in the grocery store and I see all this packaged meat, oh, grosses me out. It's disgusting. It really is. It changes you as a person. So they need to go back and start learning about that instead of learning about this Western culture as being great. It's not, believe me. Sanatan Dharma has changed my life completely. I'm forever grateful for India and their wisdom, Hinduism, Sanatan Dharma. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Thank you so much. That was very powerful. Melissa, would you like to say something on this?
Yes, absolutely. So it's quite striking that there are certain sections of society in the UK which are living much more dharmically than sections of Hindus in India. They're totally deracinated. And I think it's across all ages. So certainly, yes, in the younger generation, that's obvious. But actually, my personal experience is it filters all the way up through to the elderly population. And then sometimes actually the younger generation are stronger Hindus because they have access to social media. They can read True Indology's posts when the account is not banned. And they have access to this information, which the elderly population, the elderly generation perhaps don't. So really is my experience that it comes from all generations. I also want to say that, sorry, perhaps you can pass to Bharara Gupta. It's just come off the top of my tongue and I'll come back to me. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Bharara Gupta ji, please.
Yes, Bharara Gupta ji.
Well, you know, in the Indian tradition, there are two characters which symbolize this problem. One is Yayati. Yayati is the symbol of never-ending lust for women. Yayati, you know, he had a good life, but then he was not satisfied, so he took away the youth of his son, and had another, you know. Then there is another. So he symbolizes material living, enjoying the body and the senses. And then there is the story of Kansa, who wants power. Power to the extent that he would kill the children of his own sister. Now, obviously, there have been cycles within Indian civilization when such things have happened. After all, what was Mahabharata? We have the Krishna was not able to save his own people at Dwarka because they were behaving in such a horrible manner. Now, phases of this have happened within Indian civilization, and we must understand that for some historical reasons, because maybe we were enslaved for a long time, for centuries and centuries, and when the British left us, we were in absolute poverty. So we are simply dazed by the wealth of Europe and America and the middle class society, and a large number of people uh, they just get dazzled by all this. But I think that phase is coming out. Our education system, which has been all bonkers and all distorted for almost 150 years, will soon get in place. But I will come back that the greatest source of education for us, which is still available, is the arts of India. It is the music of India. It is the poetry of India. It is the large number of languages in which you have so many kinds of beautiful, great poets. We have more than 35 major languages and then so many other smaller languages. All this is something which talks about the value of life. And if this is made part of not just formal education, but also informal dissemination, if people start enjoying the arts in this manner, then we will be no longer Yayatis and we will be no longer Kansas, and we will not get carried away by some new invention or a little toy that happens or this kind of rush for sale and things like that. So
Very true.
that is.
Uh, I'll go to audience questions now because we're little tight on time. Melissa ji, this is a question for you. According to you, what are the 5 things that we should tell to Abrahamic practitioners when they approach us to revert to ensure that they see the light and they see the beauty of Sanatan Dharma? What are the 5 things that we should tell? It's a very pointed
Very good
question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think a first and major point is helping them to see the sort of ugly, inhumane nature of the Abrahamic faiths. That so many different people are damned. You're damned if you haven't even had the opportunity to know about Christianity, Bible, Jesus. You might live somewhere very remote. You may have lived before Jesus arrived, before the Bible was written. So for that reason, you are damned. That just doesn't make sense. You are damned if you are a scientist in medieval Europe and you're making observations on the universe, and that's in conflict with the church, such as the earth not being at the center of the universe. You're damned. So many different people are damned, including the Jews, who in the before the Second World War, many of whom, I'm sure the vast majority, were very wonderful people doing fantastically in work and not hurting anyone, and yet at the same time they were damned when Hitler, who probably was a very good Christian in that he said his prayers every day, he went to church every Sunday, perhaps he repented his sins before he committed suicide. In that way, he's a very good Christian, so he would go to hell. So that's just one clear example of the ugly and just confused nature of Christianity. Another is how many of their beliefs are just in such stark conflict with scientific discovery, with observations on the world. So, you know, the Bible is saying that the universe is just, you know, 6,000 years old. Well, obviously that's not true. It's saying, as again, going back to before, that the earth is at the center of the universe. Again, we know that's not true. So in so many ways, there's so many flaws, so many untruths in the Bible. Another way I would say is to show people just how divisive these faiths are. They try to split people up. They split families up. When you look at Hindus, you cannot imagine that somebody who has Hanumanji as their Ishtadev would hate and hope somebody who is a Vaishnavite or who worships Ma Shakti would go to hell. Yet in Christianity, you know, my own family, which, you know, as I said, you know, relatively we're quite mild Christians, but there are splits down the family where some brothers and sisters don't talk to each other because some of them are Catholic and some of them are Protestant and or evangelical or whatever. So it's just so divisive. And yet Hinduism is so inclusive. Everyone is saved. It aspires to a non-violent world, but obviously with the condition that when you do need to protect Dharma, then there is a place for violence. So it just, again, it's inclusive as long as Dharma is being protected. Another example perhaps you could highlight is that, like, the nonsense logic in the Bible, or, you know, Muhammad only coming in the last few thousand years. How can that be when the universe is, you know, so much older than that? Obviously, any divine power is so much older than just 1,000 or 2,000 years old. And when we talk about Sanatana Dharma and the Vedas being eternal, that makes sense. That is consistent, surely. And then the fifth point is, if, you know, this person you're trying to bring back to Hinduism is somebody who maybe considers themselves quite trendy, quite cosmopolitan, you might like to help them realize just how consistent Hinduism is with vegetarianism, as Renneji's been saying, the health benefits through yoga. You know, there's scientific evidence of just how needed these things are for a sustainable world, for a healthy population, a healthy, happy population. And as I mentioned earlier, in the West, there are sections of society who are realizing this for themselves. And yet in India, they're going in the opposite direction. They're going even more Western than what they think the West is. And it's just so sad. So I think there's 5 relatively concrete things you could say to somebody who you're trying to bring back to Hindu Dharma.
You know, they asked the right question to a scientist. Give 5 points. She gave exactly 5 points. The next question I'll ask Renne. It's from somebody called Mahadevan. It says that why is it that many Hindus, especially the Brahmin activists, fall for the anti-Hindu propaganda when people from other countries readily embrace Sanatana Dharma? And instead of Brahmin activist, I would say anybody who is, you know, English educated, urban, deracinated, they are very quick to let go of their Dharma, whereas people from other countries are far more open and far more willing to embrace Sanatana Dharma. Why do you think that is?
Emulate the West. And also we have so many Christian missionaries over here. And if you read their catalogs, they're going to India and they're giving them all kinds of animals. They're building temples over there in these villages. They're giving them cows, goats, you know, chickens. They're giving them so much. So a lot of it is bribery. They have to bribe them, I believe. And they're, for some reason, they're easily just getting converted from the bribery and willing to sell themselves from this beautiful Hindu Dharma for either Christianity or Islam. And that's one of the big focus points. And I even hear Christian ministries here, like they have certain manipulative tactics that they use where they'll put things in Hindi writing, or they'll manipulate it so they can try to integrate Christianity and Hinduism to get to them. And then when they get to them, then, it's all about Jesus, and we're going to give you this and we're going to give you that. So I believe a lot of it is because of that. And there needs to be really strict government laws laid down that when you're coming over with a visa, if you're on a missionary visa, it should be there that you're on a missionary visa, because a lot of them are lying. They're getting tourist visas and they're going over there in the drones and they're preaching, and the government is not stopping it. So that's a big problem, is the government needs to take action and stop this mass missionaries from America and Europe going over there on these false pretense visas that are stamped tourist, but they're not. They're going over there. And even I had an argument in Tamil Nadu. I was in a grocery store and I seen a whole bunch of foreigner people there. So I had an idea, but I walked over to them and just answered them questions, and I found out that they were from Christian missionaries. So I said to them about bribery, and you shouldn't be coming over here bribing them. Well, they got mad and they said that they were going to call the police. So I ended up leaving, but I gave them a piece of my mind before I left. Leave these people alone. If they want to accept Jesus willingly, let them. You don't have to bribe them. So I think a lot of it is that, and I think the government needs to put some really strict things. Like everybody talks about that lady Audrey. We all know who she is. That author, she has so much propaganda and hate towards the Hindus. I did a petition against her. I got like 20,000 signatures. Hopefully Prime Minister Modi ji has seen that, start taking action against her, start taking action against these other people who have hate towards India, hate towards Hindus, but yet they're going over there. And the second part of their question is, here in America, the life is different. When you get married in India, a lot of times the woman goes to the husband's family. So you have a big family system of all the different, grandparents all down. Everybody lives in a family. But here in America, we're very independent. When you turn 18, you can leave. You can do whatever you want, get your own house, get your own apartment. If you don't want kids, you don't have to have kids. So, and I think with that more independency, people like me, as Christians, when they start exploring, we see that Sanatan Dharma is really a nice path to follow, logical and practical. So, we're open to that easily, where maybe some other sectors in India, maybe their family, won't let them, but that's just my points on that.
Thank you so much. Next question is by Omkar. It's for Bharara Gupta, and I was waiting for this question actually. I was wondering how come nobody has asked this. Sanatan Dharma has so many great basic values. Though Indian or Hindu society corrected itself eventually, why did it have issues for many years like sati, untouchability, child labor? I presume, it's half a question, but basically it's the child marriages.
Marriages, yeah. Well, about sati, Meenakshi Jain wrote a wonderful book. And if you just look at historical evidence, Mahabharata has one example of sati, just one, Madri. Ramayana, I think there is one example in whole of Ramayana. And if you go through hundreds and hundreds of years, there are hardly any examples. Sati was not a common practice, please, for God's sake, historically not. It was something like a social problem or a scourge in Bengal at a given time because of certain property conditions and because of certain laws that were enforced. But sati was not a feature of Indian women immolating themselves as part of religion or social pressure. This whole thing has been concocted by missionaries in order to bring down Indian society. The second question you asked me is about sati
Untouchability.
and untouchability.
Untouchability.
Now,
Yes.
look, again, untouchability. It's a common misconception that anything who was working class was untouchable, or the so called Shudras were untouchable. That's not true. There were only some categories like Chandal or people who ate rats or certain tribes or certain people who existed outside the city and who frequented the city maybe sometime in the day who were regarded as untouchable. This is also again historically true. This was also exaggerated. In the British time, the problem became very much more than in earlier times. There is a whole history because in the medieval time, carrying feces from the city to outside was a kind of a condition that prevailed in medieval times in India. It did not prevail in ancient India. In till
That's right.
10th century, 12th century, people had their backyards and they could relieve themselves there. There are very strict rules as to how you have to dispose of the feces, and this kind of a problem doesn't exist. So look upon the whole thing historically. About child labor, again, this is a modern economic problem. Look, in ancient India, there was no primary school. Everybody got his education within the family for the family trade. So why would there be this problem of child labor? Every child labored within the family, within the home to learn a skill. So where was the problem of child labor or the possibility of child labor? This is
Child
something
marriages. Bharatji,
that
child marriages, it was said.
now
Yeah.
child marriages, yes. I think we have to put down a lot of very blatant history. You know, I was living in Greece in 87, and the Indian Parliament had a question on child marriages world over. And somebody sent a question to the Indian ambassador in Greece, and they wanted an answer the history of child marriage in Greece. So the Indian ambassador said, okay, can you write out an answer? I consulted my Greek friends, my Greek sources, and I gave them an answer which applies to India also. Do you know what was the answer? In Greece, it was under Islamic occupation for 400 years, 450 years. It was a normal practice that young boys and young girls would be picked up at the age of 7 and 8. Particularly, the boys were picked up at the age of 7 or 6. They were taken away, they were made into eunuchs, they were trained into fierce fighters called assassins, and this was the normal Turkish practice. So the Greeks, they started marrying off their boys very early. They started marrying them off at 5. They say, well, he is married, so he is no longer pure to become a assassin. Now, similar things happened in India. There was mass scale abduction of women. It is recorded so well. Just read the histories written by the Islamic rulers themselves for 900 years, right from Tabqat-e Nasiri, the earliest history, till Alamgiri, Aurangzeb's. You have a whole documentation, and it was a response of society which was not an Indian response, which was a very common response which happened in India, in Greece, or anywhere else in the world. So these are historical things. They have nothing to do with Hinduism. They have everything to do with Islam.
Thank you so much. It was a question that I expected, and there would have been nobody better than you to answer that with great authority. Now we come to the final question. It is by Viral Patel. It is to Melissa ji, and it's a very, very pointed and sharp question. A particular question, actually. Melissa ji, what are your views on anti-India, anti-Hindu Lord Nazir Ahmed?
A very good question again. So I think this question touched on a much bigger problem, and it's a problem for the UK, which is that the UK, its future, to me, is quite worrying. It's becoming, quite radically Islamicized, particularly up north. When you look at who the mayors are, the MPs, and the people looking after these areas of the country, the vast majority are Muslim. And we're not talking one or two, we're talking about the vast majority, and I find that quite scary, especially because there are so many direct events that have occurred in the UK to help people to see the danger of this. You mean, for example, the rape cases in Oxford?
Yes.
So it was there while I was studying in Oxford, so just 2 miles down the road from me. Terrible things were happening to tens and tens of British girls by Pakistani men. Yet the UK completely really hushed it up. It was not a major outcry at all. And obviously what we've seen in France recently has, I think, shaken France, and we've seen them make some concrete moves to perhaps become stronger allies then with India. They've realized who their true allies are. I don't know if people saw on Diwali the lovely message that the French embassy put out. So I think France has, been helped in a terrible way, of course, but been helped to see who their true allies are and who their enemies are, and perhaps they're going to be more cautious about who they put in power and give responsibility to now. And so I don't hope something terrible like that happens in the UK, of course, but that might be a wake-up call for the UK. If not, then the Hindus in the UK, they can also play their part by being strong Hindus and raising awareness of the beauty of Hinduism, and particularly the terrors that are being inflicted on Hindus and Christians even in India, particularly with love jihad and everything. So maybe putting that $45 trillion deficit aside, what the UK owes India under the British Raj, if Hindus can do that and help to show the UK, just show them clarity. And Hindus are in such a good position to help the UK see the reality, because the statistics show that a Hindu is 11 times less likely to be in prison than a Muslim in the UK. And Hindus only account for about 2% of the population in the UK, but they provide something like 6 or 8% of the tax. And when you look at Muslims, there's a shocking statistic. It's something like 50% are unemployed, and they're taking from the benefit system. So there are so many ways in which Hindus could have influence over the UK, but the problem is that Hindus don't seem to take the opportunity. I think it's something like 2 MPs in the whole of the UK are Hindu. It's like a tiny number, or who are strongly Hindu, I'll put it that way, and maybe only 6 or 7 who are faintly Hindu in a sort of more secular way. So Hindu parents need to see the responsibility in guiding their children into positions of responsibility, positions of power, because the Muslims are very clever in doing this. So Hindus, they need to be much more clever in doing that too, because this is just the UK I'm talking about, but in a global scheme, Hinduism has so much to offer the world. It's the way to a sustainable future for the whole world. And Hindus really have to stand up and shout to the whole world, we know the truth, this is the way.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for a very engrossing and very enriching discussion. I had a lot of fun moderating this session, and I'm sure that the audience will like this discussion. Thank you so much, Sanjay Dikshit ji and Jaipur Dialogues, for giving me a chance to moderate this session. And thank you, Bharat ji. Thank you, Melissa ji. Thank you, Renne ji, for a very invigorating discussion. May the light of Sanatana Dharma continue to shine and light up all our lives. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Ram Ram.
Ram Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.